Hey there. I know why you're here. You're looking for a story that will help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Something calming, a little mysterious. Something that carries your mind away. Well, you've come to the right place. Before we begin tonight's journey, do me a little favor. Tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Even just a good night. It really helps more sleepy souls like you find their way here. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's story. They say the worst thing you can do when someone knocks at your door at night is answer. But what if the one knocking isn't a stranger? What if it's you, an older, broken version of yourself, pleading with hollow eyes and cracked lips? Don't open it. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. A chilling tale of a man caught in a loop of terror, where every knock grows louder, every whisper more desperate, and every choice brings him closer to a horrifying truth. Tonight, we follow the haunting footsteps of a man who glimpsed his future and wished he hadn't. A future where something waits beyond the door, something that wants in. But the question is, when the knocking starts for you, will you listen or will you open it? It started on an unremarkable Tuesday night, the kind that slips through memory unnoticed, until something happens to scar it forever. The air in the apartment was unusually still, carrying a heaviness that clung to the skin like wet cloth. He didn't know why he felt uneasy. There was no sound, no shadow, nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Then came the knock, 3 slow, deliberate thuds against the front door. Not hurried, not aggressive, just patient, heavy enough to send a tremor through the floorboards. At first the brain scrambled for reasons: a delivery to the wrong address, a neighbor needing help, maybe kids playing a prank. But the clock read 2:47 a.m. No one should be knocking at that hour. He froze, phone clutched in hand, thumb hovering over the security app. Curiosity won. The camera feed blinked open, and what he saw made his stomach knot. The hallway outside was empty. No delivery man, no neighbor in pajamas, just the dim, flickering fluorescent light washing over cracked walls. But even through the grainy feed, there was a sense of weight in the air, a suggestion of something standing just out of frame. He blinked, the feed glitched, and then he saw him, a man standing in front of the door, tall, shoulders slumped, hair streaked with gray, face pale, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. His eyes were fixed directly on the camera, wide and hollow, as if they held all the despair of a lifetime. Then the man raised a trembling hand and mouthed 2 words. "Don't open." No sound, just lips moving in slow, strained motion. Before the meaning could register, the feed cut to static. When it cleared again, the hallway was empty. His chest tightened, and for a moment he couldn't move. The silence returned, thicker now, pressing in like invisible hands around his neck. He told himself it was a glitch. The camera caught someone walking past, that's all. But then another knock, louder this time. 3 thuds again, slower, more deliberate, each one resonating deep in his bones. His instinct screamed to call someone, anyone, but his fingers refused to dial. Instead, they hovered over the camera app again. This time, it wouldn't load. Only a black screen. Somewhere in the silence, he thought he heard a faint sound, like soft breathing coming from the other side of the door. Panic bubbled in his chest as he backed away, every step dragging like he was wading through water. He turned on every light in the apartment, but even the brightness didn't help. It felt like the walls were shrinking, the air growing colder. His eyes darted to the door. The peephole seemed larger somehow, like it was watching him back. Another knock, this one so loud it rattled the picture frames on the wall. 3 again, always 3. He pressed his back against the far wall, heart hammering, ears straining for any sound. Nothing followed, only silence so thick it rang in his ears. He didn't know how long he stood there, minutes, hours, waiting for the next knock. At some point, exhaustion won. He woke hours later, curled on the floor, light still blazing, phone dead in his hand. The sun was up, painting the apartment in pale grey light. No knocks, no sound, just the usual urban noise bleeding in from outside. Relief came in a wave so strong it made him laugh, thin, shaky, almost hysterical. It had to have been a dream, some sleep-deprived hallucination. He plugged in his phone and checked the camera app. The feed was back to normal. No glitches, no pale man, just an empty hallway. But as he studied the screen, he noticed something that sent fresh ice through his veins. The door frame was different, 3 faint indentations, small, shallow marks, as if fingers had pressed hard against the wood. He spent the rest of the day convincing himself it didn't happen. He worked, ate, replied to emails, forced himself into the rhythm of normalcy. But as night fell, a weight settled in his chest again. Every sound in the apartment felt louder. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, even his own breathing. He told himself he was being paranoid, until his phone buzzed. A notification from the security app. Motion detected. Front door. Hands shaking, he opened the feed. The hallway was empty. Then the screen flickered, and there he was again. The same man, older, frailer, skin drawn tight over sharp cheekbones. This time, he didn't mouth words. He just stared, tears streaming down his face, eyes red and swollen. The feed cut to black, and then 3 knocks. The knock came again, and this time it felt heavier, as though something larger, stronger, was pressing its entire weight against the wood. 3 deliberate thuds reverberated through the apartment, making the floorboards creak and the glasses in the kitchen cabinet rattle faintly against one another. He froze where he stood, holding his phone so tight his knuckles turned white. He stared at the front door as if it might breathe. The air felt thicker, like it carried particles too fine to see, but heavy enough to fill his lungs with dread. Somewhere deep inside, a primal instinct screamed that he shouldn't make a sound, shouldn't even move. His thumb hovered over the security app, but fear kept him frozen. The memory of what he had seen earlier on the camera, the older, hollow-eyed version of himself mouthing those impossible words, sat like a stone in his gut. Finally, trembling, he unlocked the phone and opened the feed. Nothing, just the empty hallway again, illuminated in the weak glow of the corridor light. But he didn't believe it this time. He felt the presence out there, standing just out of frame. The knocks came again, 3 slow, punishing hits that made the door shudder in its frame. He stumbled backward, his breath ragged, and scanned the apartment for anything he could use to reinforce the door. His mind screamed at him to act fast, and before he could second-guess himself, he grabbed the coffee table and shoved it hard against the door. It wasn't enough. One by one, he dragged over a chair, then the small bookshelf from the living room, stacking them clumsily in front of the door. His hands were slick with sweat, palms slipping against the wooden surfaces as he forced them into place. With every movement, he swore he could hear a faint scraping on the other side of the door, like nails lightly tracing along the wood. The knocks hadn't come again, not yet, but the silence was worse. It felt charged, like the pause between lightning and thunder. He backed away from his makeshift barricade until his spine pressed hard against the far wall of the apartment. His chest rose and fell in uneven gasps, each breath too loud in the oppressive quiet. The phone vibrated suddenly in his hand, startling him so badly he nearly dropped it. Another notification from the security app. Motion detected at front door. He hesitated, staring at the glowing screen, but something deep inside compelled him to open the feed. The hallway appeared at first empty, still washed in flickering fluorescent light. But then the camera glitched. The figure was there again, closer this time. His older self's face filled the camera frame, pale, gaunt, eyes ringed in deep shadows, mouth trembling as he mouthed the words again. "Don't open, don't open," over and over, more frantic each time. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with grime that streaked his cheeks. His cracked lips quivered, as though speaking took everything he had left. The feed cut abruptly to static, and he let out a sharp gasp, clutching the phone tighter. His heart felt like it might punch through his ribcage. Then the knocks returned, louder, faster, no longer the slow, deliberate rhythm of before. Now they came in rapid succession, shaking the door so violently that he thought the hinges might give. The furniture barricade groaned under the force, the bookshelf's contents toppling to the floor with a crash. He pressed his hands over his ears, trying to block out the sound, but it seeped through, relentless and punishing. And then, layered beneath the pounding, he thought he heard voices, faint at first, like whispers carried on a distant wind. But as he strained to listen, the voices grew clearer. Dozens of them, hundreds, all speaking at once, crying, begging, pleading. He couldn't make out the words, but the raw desperation in their tones sent shivers rippling down his spine. It was as if every soul in the world was pressed up against his door, clawing to be let in. His throat went dry, and he whispered to himself in a cracked, trembling voice, "It isn't real. It can't be real." But the voices didn't stop. They rose in a strange, discordant harmony, echoing through his apartment like a chorus of the damned. And then, silence, complete, suffocating silence. The abrupt absence of sound was almost more horrifying than the cacophony that had come before. His chest heaved as he forced air into his lungs, every muscle in his body coiled tight as a spring. He stared at the barricade, half expecting it to explode inward at any moment. Then came a new sound, softer, almost delicate. A faint scratching at the door, slow and methodical. It circled the frame, nails tracing invisible patterns into the wood. His stomach churned as he imagined long, skeletal fingers dragging along the surface. And then came a voice, so soft it was nearly inaudible. "Please." The word hung in the air, small and pitiful. "Please, help me." The voice cracked on the last syllable, dissolving into a wet, gurgling sob. He pressed his palms harder against his ears, but it wasn't enough. The voice was inside now, not outside the door, but somewhere closer. His phone vibrated in his lap again. Another notification. Motion detected. Living room. His blood turned to ice as his eyes flicked toward the phone screen. The security feed had changed. It no longer showed the hallway. It showed his apartment. The camera angle was impossible, hovering from a corner of the ceiling, looking down on him like an unseen eye. And there, standing behind him in the shadows, was the pale figure of his older self. His face was twisted in agony, lips still moving in silent desperation. He didn't turn around. He didn't dare. He stared at the phone as the figure slowly raised one trembling hand toward the back of his head, fingers claw-like and gray. The voice from the door grew louder. "Please, open it." The older self's mouth gaped wide, stretching impossibly far, and he screamed, not with sound, but with an expression so pure in its terror. It sent a shock of nausea through him. The phone screen glitched again, and when it cleared, the apartment feed was gone, only black. Then the pounding returned, harder than ever. The barricade trembled under each blow, the bookshelf tipping dangerously to one side. He scrambled backward, crawling until his shoulders slammed into the cold plaster wall. His mind screamed for him to do something, call for help, break a window, anything, but his body wouldn't obey. He was paralyzed, sweat dripping from his forehead into his eyes. His breaths came in short, ragged bursts, his vision tunneling as the pounding continued without pause. And then, so suddenly, it made his ears ring. Everything went silent again. No knocks, no voices, just his own ragged breathing filling the void. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he forced himself to his feet, legs trembling like brittle branches. He crept toward the barricade, the urge to peek through the peephole overwhelming him, despite every instinct screaming not to. His fingers brushed the wood of the door when his phone vibrated one last time. The screen displayed a single line of text in plain white letters. "You open it, you become me." The message on the phone screen pulsed faintly like a dying heartbeat. "You open it, you become me." He stared at the words, unable to tear his eyes away, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His mind scrambled for sense, for logic, for some rational explanation, but there was none. His throat felt raw, as though he'd been screaming, though he couldn't remember making a sound. Hands trembling violently, he dropped the phone to the floor with a clatter that echoed far too loud in the suffocating silence. He didn't pick it up. Something about the glowing screen felt wrong, like it was no longer a tool but a mouthpiece for something else, something reaching through the cracks of his reality. The thought made his stomach lurch. He pressed his palms to his temples, squeezing his eyes shut so tightly. He saw stars bursting against the blackness. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. It was a breakdown, a stress-induced hallucination, a waking nightmare born from sleepless nights and too much coffee. But deep down, under the desperate rationalizations, there was a primal certainty gnawing at him like a starving rat. This was real, and it wasn't over. As if to punctuate the thought, the knocking began again, no longer patient, no longer measured. It came in a frenzied rhythm now, 3 rapid-fire thuds, followed by another 3, and another. The door shuddered under the onslaught, the barricade groaning as the bookshelf began to tip further, its contents spilling across the floor. His breath hitched as the sound of fingernails scraping against wood returned, this time accompanied by low, guttural whispers threading through the pounding. "Let us in." The voices overlapped, male and female, young and old, their tones desperate and mocking all at once. He stumbled backward, eyes darting wildly around the apartment, as though expecting to see hands reaching from every shadow. The air felt colder now, each exhale billowing in faint mist. He could feel the vibrations of the knocks in his feet, in his chest, as though they came from inside the building itself. He wanted to run, but his body was rooted to the spot, muscles locking tight, like he was already turning to stone. The whispers grew louder. "Please, open it." A child's voice this time, high-pitched and trembling, then a woman's voice, calm, soothing. almost maternal. "It's safe, I promise. Just open the door." He shook his head violently, pressing his hands tighter over his ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside his head, curling around his thoughts, like vines around a rotting tree. His heart hammered as he stumbled back against the wall, his shoulder catching painfully on a framed photo that fell to the floor and shattered. The sound barely registered over the cacophony pounding in his skull. He sank to his knees, rocking slightly, as he whispered to himself, "It's not real, it's not real." But no matter how many times he said it, the voices didn't fade. If anything, they grew clearer, more insistent. "He's waiting for you," one of them hissed. "You have to let him in. You are him." His phone buzzed violently on the floor, vibrating so hard it skittered across the tiles. Against every screaming instinct, he reached for it with trembling fingers and turned the screen toward himself. The camera feed had returned, but the view wasn't the hallway this time. It was his apartment again, just like before. From the impossible overhead angle, it showed him hunched on the floor, arms wrapped tight around his knees, eyes wide with terror, and standing behind him, mere inches away, was his older self. His face was pale and gaunt, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes sunken and rimmed in black. But this time, his mouth wasn't moving in warning. It was twisted into a grotesque grin that split his face unnaturally wide, teeth yellow and jagged, gums slick with blood. His older self raised one trembling hand and pressed it gently against the back of his younger self's head. A cold, clammy sensation bloomed there, sending a shock wave of nausea through his stomach. He spun around with a strangled scream. No one was there. The air behind him was empty, but the chill remained, sinking deep into his skin like icy fingers. His phone clattered to the floor again, and when he dared to glance at it, the screen was black, except for a faint reflection of his own face. But it wasn't quite his. The eyes staring back were wrong. Older, hollow, brimming with a sadness so profound it felt like staring into the bottom of a well. And then, almost too faint to notice, the reflection's lips began to move. "Don't open it." The words didn't come as sound, but as a vibration in his skull, each syllable thudding like a heartbeat in his brain. He scrambled backward until his spine struck the wall again, his breaths coming fast and shallow. The pounding on the door grew frenzied now, each blow threatening to splinter the wood. The furniture barricade jerked forward with every impact, inching away from the door, as if invisible hands were peeling it back piece by piece. The voices inside his head reached a fever pitch, a chorus of wails and whispers and screams, all begging him to open the door. Some promised salvation, others threatened unimaginable pain if he didn't comply. His head felt like it might split in two from the noise. He pressed his palms against his ears until his nails dug into his scalp, but nothing could block them out. Then came a new sound, softer than the rest. A sob, thin, weak, and unmistakably his own. It was his voice now, crying from the other side of the door. "Please, help me." The words were choked, ragged, as though spoken through a mouthful of blood. His stomach twisted as nausea rose in his throat. The door handle rattled violently, the metal squealing in protest. His phone buzzed one last time on the floor, the screen lighting up with a single notification. "It's too late." The notification glared up at him like an accusation carved into glass. "It's too late." His breath came in jagged bursts, each inhale searing his chest, like cold fire. He didn't touch the phone this time. He didn't want to. It felt alive now, a conduit for whatever was reaching through from the other side of the door, or the other side of time. The pounding against the barricade paused for the first time, in what felt like hours, and the silence that replaced it was almost worse. His ears rang in the absence of sound, and his trembling body felt alien, like something wearing his skin and bones. Then came the voice again. His voice, but older, rasping, and wet as though spoken through shredded lungs. "Open it. Let it happen. You can't stop it." The words slipped under his skull like oil, staining his thoughts with dread. His hands shook so violently that his nails cut shallow crescent moons into his palms. He pressed his back harder into the wall, whispering to himself, "Don't open it. Don't open it." But deep down, a horrible realization began to bloom like mold spreading in darkness. This wasn't a choice. It never had been. The door handle began to turn, slow, deliberate. Metal squealed as the knob twisted back and forth, testing, probing. The barricade trembled, the bookshelf tilting dangerously to one side. His heart slammed against his ribs, his pulse a drumbeat in his ears. He wanted to run. Every cell in his body screamed at him to flee, but his legs felt locked in place, heavy as lead. The scratching started again. This time, it wasn't confined to the door. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, long ragged claws dragging endlessly through wood and plaster, circling him like predators in the dark. Voices whispered from every direction, some coaxing, some commanding, some screaming so loud his vision wavered, a high-pitched ringing filling his head until tears blurred his eyes. "It's waiting," one voice hissed from just inches away, though there was nothing to see. "We're waiting," another echoed from the ceiling above. His lips parted, as though to scream, but no sound emerged. His throat was too tight, his voice swallowed by the oppressive weight, pressing in on all sides. The phone vibrated again, sliding across the floor toward him with a sound like fingernails on glass. Against every instinct screaming inside him, he picked it up, hand trembling so violently he could barely hold it steady. The camera feed had returned, but not to the hallway. It wasn't even his apartment anymore. It showed a room bathed in shifting black shadows, walls alive with writhing shapes that pulsed like living things. And there, sitting in the center, was his older self. But he was different now. His body was broken, arms twisted at impossible angles, skin stretched tight over bones that jutted like knives. His hollow eyes glowed faintly in the darkness as he looked straight into the camera. His lips moved again, slower this time, forming the words with effort as blood seeped from the corners of his mouth. "It's you, you're me. Let it in." A gurgling laugh bubbled up from the screen, distorted and wet, making his stomach clench violently. The older self leaned forward, his face filling the frame, and whispered in a voice so low it vibrated through the phone like a heartbeat. "Open the door." A sharp crack snapped his attention back to the barricade. The bookshelf had tipped fully now, crashing to the floor in a thunderous roar that sent books and trinkets skittering across the tiles. Only the coffee table remained pressed against the door, and even it was sliding inch by inch as the handle rattled violently. His body finally moved. He scrambled to his feet, backing away until his shoulders hit the far wall. His phone slipped from his grasp and shattered on the floor, the screen splintering into a spider web of cracks. He couldn't take his eyes off the door. A thin line of darkness had appeared between the door and the frame, as if it was breathing, exhaling cold, damp air into the apartment. His stomach churned as the scent of earth and rot filled his nostrils, thick enough to taste. And then the voice, his voice, but layered with others, spoke again. You've seen it, you've always known, you are the knock. Something moved beyond the door. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Its size, its presence, impossibly vast, pressing against the thin wooden barrier that separated him from whatever waited on the other side. The door bulged inward, as though a great weight leaned against it, the hinges squealing in protest. He whimpered, clutching at his head, fingernails digging deep enough to draw blood. The whispering voices rose into a deafening roar, words overlapping, twisting, reforming into one unified command that thundered through his mind. Open it. His knees buckled, and he crumpled to the floor, sobs shaking his frame. But amid the chaos, one thought clawed to the surface, weak and trembling but persistent. What if I don't? What if I fight? As if answering, the older version of himself appeared again, not in the camera, not in reflection, but standing right there, in the apartment, halfway between shadow and substance. His face was a mask of anguish, his mouth wide in a soundless scream. He reached toward his younger self with trembling, blood-streaked hands, his eyes, empty, endless voids, pleaded silently. Don't open it. The pounding on the door stopped. So did the whispers, so did the scratching. The apartment fell into a silence so deep it felt alive. He stared at the door, chest heaving, every instinct battling the compulsion to get up, walk over, and turn the handle. His older self shook his head violently, his lips cracking open as he mouthed the words again. Don't open it. And then he dissolved like ash caught in a gust of wind. But the silence didn't last. A single knock came, louder than any before. So loud it sent a hairline crack snaking up the plaster wall. 3 slow, deliberate thuds, and then a voice, not outside the door, not inside his head, but behind him. You already did. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. You already did. He froze, every muscle in his body locking tight, as though he'd been turned to stone. The voice hadn't come from outside. It hadn't even come from his own mind. It was right behind him, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of breath on the back of his neck. His skin prickled as though invisible insects crawled over every inch of it. He wanted to turn around, but something deep inside, something old and primal, screamed not to. Turning meant seeing. Seeing meant knowing, and knowing meant the end. His chest heaved with shallow, rapid breaths, each inhale more ragged than the last. Sweat beaded on his forehead and dripped into his eyes, stinging, but he didn't dare blink. He didn't dare move. The air seemed thicker now, humid and cloying, filled with a scent that turned his stomach, wet soil, rusted metal, and something else he couldn't name. A faint sound began to rise behind him, so soft at first he thought it was his imagination. A wheeze, labored breathing, and beneath it, the faint clicking of teeth snapping together in a nervous, erratic rhythm. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to obey. His arms hung limp at his sides, hands trembling so violently his fingernails tapped against the floor in a rapid staccato beat. Somewhere deep in his skull, a voice whispered, not the chorus of hundreds he'd heard before, but his own voice, older, hoarse, dripping with despair. You're not supposed to turn around. Not yet. His vision blurred, spots of black dancing in his periphery. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to wake up. to find himself in bed with the memory of this nightmare fading like fog in sunlight. But there was no sunlight here, only darkness pressing in from every corner of the apartment, growing heavier, almost liquid. And the breathing behind him continued, wet, ragged, impossibly close. The clicking teeth grew faster, louder, until it sounded like the clattering of bones. His mouth opened in a soundless scream as he felt something brush his hair, a hand, cold and damp, its fingers lingering for a heartbeat before pulling away. The spell broke. His body jerked forward violently, scraping his knees across the floor as he scrambled toward the far wall. He didn't look back. He didn't dare. He slammed his back against the cold plaster, chest heaving as his lungs fought for air. His eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for something, anything that made sense. But the apartment didn't look the same anymore. The walls seemed closer, the shadows thicker, as if the space itself had warped while he wasn't looking. The furniture lay scattered across the floor from his earlier panic, and the door was open, just a crack. A thin sliver of blackness yawned between the door and the frame, leaking tendrils of darkness that curled lazily into the room like smoke from a dying fire. His stomach lurched violently as he stared at it, every instinct screaming that whatever lay beyond that door was not the hallway, not the apartment building, not even the world he knew. It was something else entirely, something hungry. For a moment he thought he saw movement in the darkness, a shape, a figure shifting just beyond the threshold, impossibly tall and thin, its limbs too long to be human. His breath caught as two faint pinpricks of light appeared in the blackness, eyes distant and unblinking, fixed directly on him. He pressed his back harder into the wall, willing the door to close on its own, but the gap remained, the air around it vibrating faintly like the surface of a drum. Then came a sound, so faint it was almost inaudible. A voice, his voice. "I told you not to open it." The whisper carried a weight that felt like lead poured into his veins, dragging him down until his limbs felt impossibly heavy. His vision blurred again, but not from tears. The edges of his world seemed to fray like old fabric, threads unraveling to reveal a black void beneath. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat louder than the last, until it felt like the only sound in existence. His phone buzzed weakly on the floor, its cracked screen flickering to life. Against his better judgment, he crawled toward it, fingers grasping the cold glass with trembling desperation. The security feed appeared, but it no longer showed any place he recognized. The camera was now inside the void, its lens trained on a barren landscape of shifting shadows and writhing forms that had no faces, no features, only suggestions of things that should not exist. And there, standing alone in the middle of that nightmare terrain, was his older self. His body was barely recognizable now, limbs twisted, skin hanging in tatters, eyes hollow and glowing faintly with an inner light. He stared directly into the camera, lips moving in a slow, deliberate cadence. "It's too late. You opened it. Now we're the same." His head cocked to the side at an unnatural angle, the bones in his neck cracking audibly through the speaker. Then his mouth split into an impossibly wide grin that stretched far beyond the limits of skin and bone. "You're next," he said, his voice a wet, gurgling hiss that filled the apartment. The feed cut out with a high-pitched shriek of static. The phone went dark again, the screen spider-webbed with fresh cracks, as though invisible fingers had crushed it from the inside. He dropped it with a choked cry and scrambled backward, his hands clawing at the floor for purchase. But the air was thicker now, so dense it felt like breathing through wet cement. His head pounded with a migraine so intense it made his vision ripple like heat over asphalt. Then the door creaked, slowly, deliberately. The gap widened another inch, and a cold wind swept into the room, carrying with it the stench of rot and decay so potent he gagged. The pinprick eyes in the darkness blinked once, slow and deliberate, and then a hand emerged from the void. Long, thin, fingers tipped with jagged nails that scraped against the floor as it began to pull itself forward. The hand that emerged from the gap was wrong. In every way a hand could be wrong. The skin, or what passed for it, was grey and slick, stretched so tightly over long, angular bones that every movement made it creak like old wood. The fingers were impossibly long, jointed too many times, each tipped with nails like shards of obsidian that scraped deep gouges into the floorboards as it dragged itself forward. He pressed his back harder into the wall, nails clawing at the plaster as though he could burrow through it to escape. His breathing came in sharp, shallow bursts, each inhale catching on the edges of a sob. He didn't have the strength to release. The hand flexed once, fingers splaying wide in a gesture so disturbingly human, it sent a fresh wave of bile surging into his throat. Then it clutched the edge of the doorframe and pulled. Slowly, the rest of the arm slid into view, impossibly long and sinewy, the skin hanging in ragged strips. Beyond the widening gap, the faint pinprick eyes never wavered, fixed directly on him with a patient hunger that felt older than time. A voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere at once. His voice, but cracked now, layered with other tones, male, female, childlike, monstrous, all speaking in perfect unison. Don't fight. It's already you. He clamped his hands over his ears until his nails dug deep into his scalp. But the voice didn't fade. It vibrated inside his skull, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He wanted to scream, but no sound would come. His throat felt clogged with something thick and wet, and for a horrifying moment he imagined opening his mouth only for a torrent of black sludge to pour out. The creature's other hand slipped through the gap, landing with a heavy thud that made the floor shudder. The wood beneath its fingers began to rot, instantly, bubbling and cracking as if decades of decay were unfolding in seconds. Its shoulders appeared next, too narrow, too jagged, moving with a sickening liquid grace that made the air around it seem to warp and bend. The gap in the door had widened enough now that the darkness beyond no longer seemed confined to a space. It bled into the room like ink spreading in water, tendrils of shadow curling and lashing out with minds of their own. One brushed against his ankle, and he screamed, a thin, pitiful sound that tore at his raw throat. The cold that followed the touch wasn't physical. It went deeper, straight into his bones, hollowing him out as if something had reached inside and scooped part of him away. His vision swam. The apartment seemed smaller now, the walls bending inward, the ceiling pressing down until the room felt like a coffin. And then, without warning, the creature froze. Its head, if it could be called that, tilted slightly, almost curious. The pinprick eyes blinked once, twice. Then a rasping hiss filled the room. We remember, a sudden vibration against his thigh made him flinch violently. His phone, somehow, impossibly, it was glowing again. He snatched it up with trembling fingers and saw the camera feed had returned, but it wasn't showing the hallway. It wasn't even showing his apartment. The screen displayed a vast, endless expanse of shadow, like the void itself had grown eyes and was staring back. In the center stood his older self, hunched and broken, skin stretched thin over protruding bones. But now there was something different in his eyes, a faint flicker of recognition. He leaned close to the camera, lips trembling as he mouthed the words again. "Don't open it." But this time he added more, "or we never leave." The words were faint, almost drowned out by static, but they lodged in his chest like shards of glass. His older self's eyes widened suddenly, mouth stretching in a silent scream as dark hands, longer, thinner than any human's, wrapped around his throat and pulled him violently into the void. The feed went black. The creature at the door let out a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the apartment, like the growl of something impossibly large. Its hands clutched the frame tighter, splintering the wood as it pulled its upper body into the room. The stench of rot and wet earth intensified, making him gag and choke. "Don't," he whispered hoarsely, though whether to the thing or himself he didn't know. His hands gripped the cracked phone so tightly, the screen splintered further under his fingers. Somewhere deep inside, a single thread of clarity emerged through the suffocating fog of terror. "This isn't the first time." The thought came unbidden, sharp and cold as ice. This has happened before, and suddenly he remembered flashes, moments he couldn't place. Standing in the same apartment, at the same door, seeing the same figure on the camera, pleading, hearing the same knocks, over and over and over, each time ending the same way. The door opening, the creature's head twisted unnaturally, and he caught a glimpse of its face, if it could be called that. A shifting, seething mass of features, some human, some utterly alien, all writhing and overlapping in grotesque patterns, and in the center of the mess, his own face appeared for a heartbeat, pale, screaming, eyes wide with terror. He clamped his hands over his mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. The phone in his hand vibrated violently, one last time. The cracked screen flickered to life and displayed a single message in stark white letters. "You let it in. You become me. Stop it." His trembling thumb hovered over the power button. For a single fragile moment, he wondered if he had a choice. But then the creature lunged forward. The creature's lunge wasn't fast. It wasn't clumsy either. It was measured, like a predator that already knows its prey is cornered. Its arms extended unnaturally as it pulled itself further into the apartment, fingers flexing and scraping furrows into the floorboards. The shadows leaking through the widening doorway grew thicker, writhing like a nest of serpents, curling around his legs, brushing his skin with a cold, so deep it felt like his blood was freezing in his veins. He tried to crawl backward, nails breaking against the floor as he scrabbled for purchase, but the apartment seemed to shrink with each desperate movement. The walls pressed closer. The ceiling dipped lower. The air grew heavier until it felt like trying to breathe through wet cloth. The creature's pinprick eyes followed him with patient, predatory calm. And then it spoke, not with a voice, but with a vibration that echoed inside his bones. "You opened it. You always open it." A choked sob tore from his throat as memories flashed unbidden across his mind. Shards of moments he didn't remember living, but knew with absolute certainty were real. Different apartments, different doors, different nights, but always the same knock, always the same choice, always the same ending. He saw himself in countless variations, older, twisted, gaunt, and hollow-eyed, pleading with younger versions of himself on flickering security feeds, mouthing the same desperate warning. "Don't open it. but it never mattered. Somehow, inevitably, the door always opened. His stomach churned violently as the realization sank in. This wasn't happening for the first time. It wasn't even happening for the 100th. He was caught in a loop, a cycle, and every turn brought him closer to becoming the thing he saw in the camera. The phone buzzed weakly in his hand, its screen cracked beyond recognition, but still managing to glow faintly. He looked down and saw a single new message, the words blurry and fragmented through the spiderweb glass. "Break it. Stop the knock." His trembling fingers hovered over the screen, but before he could respond, the creature's hand slammed against the floor beside him. The impact sent vibrations through the wood and into his bones, making his teeth chatter. It leaned closer, its head cocked in an almost curious tilt, as it studied him with those cold, pinpoint eyes. He could feel the weight of its stare pressing against his skull, probing, searching for a weakness. Shadows pooled around its elongated limbs, creeping toward him like tendrils eager to wrap around his body. The temperature in the room dropped further, his breath fogging in the frigid air. "Why me?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper, but it echoed unnaturally in the thick air. The creature's head twitched sharply at the sound, and its face, still a shifting, writhing mass of features, momentarily froze. His own face surfaced again in the swirling chaos, screaming silently before melting back into the darkness. "Because you knock," the creature whispered, its voice now layered with hundreds, no thousands of overlapping tones. Male, female, childlike, monstrous, all speaking in unison. "And when you knock, we answer." The words sent a cold electric jolt racing down his spine. He shook his head violently, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't knock," he whispered hoarsely, though even as he said it, he wasn't sure if it was true. The shadows surged suddenly, wrapping around his legs and arms, pinning him in place. He struggled, but the darkness was impossibly strong, its cold grip burning like dry ice against his skin. The creature leaned closer still, until its faceless head hovered inches from his own. He could feel it breathing, or something like breathing, a wet, rattling sound that sent waves of nausea rolling through his stomach. Its words reverberated through his skull again. "You did. You will. You always do." And then, impossibly, he felt its cold, damp fingers press lightly against his chest, right over his racing heart. A memory exploded behind his eyes, not his own but older, heavier, carrying with it centuries of voices and faces and knocks that never stopped. He saw doors opening in endless succession, each revealing a new horror, a new him, and always, always the same whispered plea from the other side. "Don't open it." The phone in his hand vibrated one final time, the cracked screen flashing a new message. "Break the cycle." His thumb hovered over the screen, tears blurring his vision, his body trembling violently as the creature's grip tightened around him. His mind screamed at him that there was no way out, that there never had been, but the faintest ember of defiance flickered in his chest. He rasped aloud, voice shaking. The creature recoiled slightly, as if the question itself had stung it. Its pinprick eyes blinked once, twice. Then its many voices spoke again, softer this time, almost gentle. "You know how." The coldness of its fingers pressing against his chest seeped deep, not just into his skin, but into his bones, into his blood, curling through his veins, like ice water laced with something far worse. He felt his heartbeat stumble, skip, then pound frantically like a trapped bird smashing itself against a window. It was too much. His vision tilted at the edges, tunneling into blackness, even as he fought to stay conscious. gasping for air that felt heavier with each shallow inhale. The apartment around him no longer seemed solid. The walls buckled faintly, warping inward as if pulled by some immense force beyond them, their surfaces rippling like fabric caught in a slow-motion gale. Shadows hung from the ceiling in long, finger-like tendrils, swaying gently though there was no wind. The creature's head cocked, that nightmarish swirl of faces writhing and merging and splitting again, until his own terrified face stared back at him from the center of it all, pale and hollow-eyed. His reflection in that thing twisted its cracked lips into a wide, broken grin that split its cheeks to the bone. And in that awful moment, he realized what he was looking at wasn't some alien horror. It was himself, drawn out, corrupted, stretched beyond recognition by endless repetitions of this moment. Its voice vibrated the air and his skull alike, every syllable heavy and inevitable. You've opened it before. You'll open it again. You're already becoming me. The words struck with the weight of a falling hammer, cracking something inside him that had, until now, refused to fully believe. It wasn't just déjà vu or some hallucinatory spiral. This was a loop, a cycle so deeply embedded in his reality that it had become a part of him, a parasite, feeding on every choice and every hesitation. He saw flashes, split-second visions of himself in countless iterations, standing in this same apartment, staring at the same door, hearing the same frantic knocks, and making the same terrible decision over and over. Sometimes he resisted for hours, barricading himself in hopeless defiance. Sometimes he opened the door immediately, compelled by curiosity or panic. But every path led here to the creature, to the shadows, to his own face staring back through a mask of decay and agony. He had begged himself not to open it countless times across countless cycles, his older self screaming warnings through fractured phone screens, cameras and mirrors. But it never mattered. Somehow, in some way, he always became the thing standing over him now. His hands shook violently, the cracked phone vibrating weakly in his palm, as if aware of his paralysis, as if pleading with him to move before it was too late. The shadows tightened around his legs and arms, slick and cold like oil, squeezing until pain shot up his limbs. His breath hitched as he felt his body begin to lift slightly from the floor, the tendrils dragging him closer to the door. His phone screen flickered suddenly, static breaking through for a split second before a single blurry word appeared. Break. His pulse hammered so loud he could barely hear the creature's voice when it spoke again, deeper now, almost mournful. There's no breaking, no stopping. You are the knock, you are the answer. Its elongated fingers brushed against his face with surprising gentleness, sending a jolt of ice through his skin. You ask, and we come. You always ask. He choked on a sob, head shaking violently, as tears streaked hot down his cheeks. No, he whispered hoarsely, though the word felt hollow even as it left his lips. A crack echoed through the room as one of the door's hinges tore loose, the gap widening further. Beyond it, an endless abyss churned vast and alive, its writhing forms too immense to comprehend. Eyes, too many to count, blinked in unison from the void, fixing on him with the casual hunger of something that had waited eons. The phone buzzed again, harder this time, nearly slipping from his sweat-slick fingers. Another word stuttered across the fractured display. His breathing came faster, sharp and shallow, his chest rising and falling so violently it felt like his ribs might snap. The creature's pinprick eyes glimmered faintly as it regarded him with that tilting bird-like motion, as though seeing him for the first time, not just as prey, but as a mirror. Its voices layered and overlapped, thousands of them whispering in sickening harmony. Break. What? The door. The loop. Yourself. Each word rolled through the apartment like distant thunder, rattling the glass of the windows. He clutched the phone tighter, its cracked edges biting into his palm, his thumb trembling as it hovered over the fractured screen. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't even know if he could stop any of this. But something in his gut, something deep and desperate told him he had to try. His trembling thumb pressed down. The screen flared white, blinding and hot. The creature screamed. The sound was inhuman, impossibly loud, vibrating the apartment so violently that dust rained from the ceiling and picture frames fell from the walls. Its limbs jerked spasmodically as the shadows recoiled, retreating toward the doorway in writhing, chaotic waves. The hand gripping his chest pulled away as if burned, leaving behind a sickly grey mark where it had touched his skin. The door, still half open, began to groan and shudder, as if caught in a violent wind. Splinters flew from its edges as the void beyond it surged with an almost tidal force, tendrils of darkness whipping violently as they were sucked backward. The creature thrashed, its faceless head twisting unnaturally, features shifting so rapidly it made him nauseous. "You fool," it howled, its voice splintering into a cacophony of rage and despair. "You can't break what's already begun." And then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. The apartment stilled, the air warmed slightly, the shadows receded until they were gone. He collapsed to the floor, gasping and shaking, the phone slipping from his numb fingers. It was dead now, truly dead, its screen black and unresponsive. For a long moment, he just lay there, chest heaving, eyes locked on the door. It was closed. The hinges looked intact, the gap had vanished, but something about it still felt wrong. The wood seemed darker, somehow older, and faintly, barely audible. He thought he heard breathing. He pressed his back to the far wall, pulling his knees tight to his chest, his mind a swirling void of fear and exhaustion. And then, breaking the fragile silence, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The knocks reverberated through the apartment, like the hollow tolling of a distant bell, each one slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy. He flinched at every sound, clutching his knees tighter, as though his arms alone could shield him from what lay beyond the door. His ears rang in the silence between each thud, a silence so oppressive it seemed to pulse like a living thing, breathing just beneath the threshold. He told himself it was impossible that he had closed the door, that he had broken the cycle, that he had won, but the knocks came again. 3, then silence, then 3 more. His mind reeled, clawing desperately for logic, for something to anchor him to reality, but the apartment around him felt wrong in ways he couldn't name. The walls still looked the same, but their corners seemed sharper, their angles just slightly off, as though the space itself had been rewritten. And that smell, he hadn't noticed it before. Faint, but unmistakable. Damp earth, rusted iron, and something sweeter, cloying, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. His stomach turned as a memory flickered unbidden, a glimpse of himself from the security feed, older, ragged, eyes hollow as he whispered, "You already opened it." He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing his palms hard against his ears, desperate to block out the knocks that now seemed to vibrate inside his skull. But even in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw movement, shapes, long, spindly fingers reaching through impossible gaps, brushing his skin with cold so deep it felt like fire. His breath hitched, chest rising and falling in short, panicked gasps. He wanted to scream, but fear had locked his throat tight. Then came the voice, not outside the door, not in his mind, but directly behind him, soft and wet, almost tender. "You think you stopped it." He froze. The air behind him was cold, too cold, and he could feel something there, tall and still, its presence so heavy it made the tiny hairs on his neck stand on end. He didn't turn. He couldn't. Every instinct screamed at him that to look was to see, and to see was to end. "You closed a door," it whispered again, so close he felt the dampness of its breath. "But there are more." His chest tightened as the words sank in, each syllable pressing down on his ribs like lead weights. More doors. He shook his head violently, gripping his hair until his nails dug deep into his scalp. No, he couldn't accept that. There had only been this door, this night, this horror. Anything more was unthinkable. But as if answering his denial, the floor beneath him shuddered faintly. Then again, stronger this time, as though some immense weight was shifting far below. The knocks resumed, louder now, the sound vibrating up through his legs, his spine, settling deep in his teeth until they ached. He clenched his jaw to keep from sobbing aloud. The sound wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, all around him. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then all at once. Knock, 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 knock. The rhythm splintered into chaos, dozens of unseen fists pounding from every direction. He bolted upright, stumbling back against the far wall, his eyes darting wildly as the apartment seemed to twist around him. The walls pulsed faintly, their surfaces rippling like water as handprints bloomed across them, dozens, hundreds, each pressed flat, as though trying to push through from the other side. Small hands, large hands, hands with too many fingers. They pressed and pulled and scraped, leaving dark, oily smears in their wake. The knocking became a roar, a deafening cacophony of wood, splintering, and voices whispering and screaming over each other in an endless, overlapping chorus. "Let us in." The words were everywhere and nowhere at once, spoken by voices familiar and alien, some echoing like his own. He clamped his hands over his ears, teeth gritted until his jaw ached, tears streaming down his face as his body shook violently. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Just stop!" But the knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, more insistent. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound cut off. The silence that followed was absolute, ringing, and thick, like a vacuum. He dared not move, hardly dared to breathe. His ears strained for the faintest hint of sound. Nothing. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his hands from his ears, the skin sticky with sweat. He swallowed hard, his throat raw and dry, eyes fixed on the door. It remained shut, still and silent. He took one trembling step forward. Then another. The floor creaked softly beneath his weight, the sound loud in the suffocating stillness. As he drew nearer, his stomach churned violently. The door looked wrong. Its surface seemed to pulse faintly, as if something enormous and alive pressed gently against it from the other side. A faint outline appeared in the wood, a hand, fingers splayed wide, pressing hard enough to bow the surface inward. His breath caught as another hand appeared. Then another. Soon the entire door writhed with unseen pressure, bulging slightly in and out with every pulse. His phone, forgotten until now, buzzed weakly in his pocket. The sound nearly made him scream. With trembling fingers, he fumbled it out. its cracked screen flickering erratically, as if struggling to remain alive. A new message appeared in stark, jagged letters. "There's still time." His thumb hovered over the screen, too terrified to press it, too terrified not to. Another message blinked onto the display. Before he could decide, "Not this door." The first door. He frowned, confusion cutting briefly through his terror. The first door. What did that mean? There had only been one door, one choice. The knocking resumed suddenly, so loud and forceful the wood splintered visibly around the frame. A low, guttural moan echoed from the other side, wet and hungry. He stumbled back, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Another message appeared, almost pleading now. "Break the first door." And then it hit him. The memory, faint at first, but growing sharper, clearer. A door, not here, not now, but in a place he barely remembered. A door from years ago. His childhood home, that night. The knock at his bedroom door. He hadn't opened it. Or had he? The memory felt wrong, fragmented, like an old film reel played out of order. He saw flashes of his younger self, standing frozen in the dark, as slow, deliberate knocks rattled the thin wood. A voice whispering his name, a hand reaching for the knob. Was that when it began? His pulse thundered in his ears as a fresh message blinked across his phone. This isn't the first sickle. The door before him bowed violently inward with a sound like snapping bones, splinters raining onto the floor. A gnarled grey finger, too long, too thin, poked through the crack, clawing at the air. "Open it." The voice thundered through the apartment, no longer whispering but screaming, its many layers vibrating his teeth in their sockets. He clutched his head, sobbing, rocking slightly as the walls around him cracked, deep fissures splitting the plaster as shadows poured through. The knocking grew wild again, faster, louder, like hundreds of fists pounding from all sides. And through the cacophony came the softest whisper, cutting through it all like a knife. "Break the first door, or be me forever." The memory clawed at his mind, sharp and insistent like splinters under the skin. He saw himself at 8 years old, standing barefoot on a cold wooden floor, clutching a stuffed animal so tightly its seams split. The knocking had come then too. Slow, deliberate, 3 at a time, rattling the thin bedroom door, as the brass knob twitched faintly under some unseen hand. His younger self had frozen, paralyzed with a fear so raw it vibrated in his small bones. And then a voice, familiar yet wrong, had whispered his name. Not his full name, just the nickname only his family used. The syllables dripped through the air like syrup, thick and wet, sliding under the door with a promise of safety. But there had been no safety. He remembered stepping forward. His small hand had hovered over the knob, shaking violently, and then blankness. The memory cut off like a film reel torn from its projector. He gasped, clawing at his scalp, as if he could pull the missing pieces free. But they refused to come. His phone buzzed again, jolting him back to the present, its screen flashing a single command: "Don't let it start." He choked on a sob as the realization struck deep and cold. He hadn't closed that first door. He had opened it. That was the route. That was why it had never stopped. The door in front of him groaned violently as cracks spider-webbed across its surface, dark liquid oozing through the fissures and pooling onto the floor in thick, tar-like globs. He stumbled back, heart pounding so hard it hurt, clutching the phone to his chest as if it were an anchor in this shifting nightmare. But the apartment felt alive now, every surface pulsing faintly, breathing in unison, with the monstrous thing pressing against the door. The whispers returned, faint at first, then louder, overlapping into a rising chorus of voices, men, women, children, all speaking the same word, in perfect, terrible harmony. His knees buckled as he slammed his hands over his ears, but the sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside his head, reverberating in his skull, with every pounding heartbeat. He squeezed his eyes shut and shouted, "No." His voice cracked raw, but the voices only laughed, high, wet, gurgling laughter that made his skin crawl. The floorboards beneath his feet buckled suddenly, the wood splintering and cracking as a grey skeletal hand shot up from the gap, its fingers too long, too thin, curling in a grotesque parody of a beckoning gesture. He staggered back, his heel catching on a loose board. He crashed hard against the far wall, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. His phone slipped from his grasp, clattering across the floor and coming to rest inches from the writhing hand. The screen flickered weakly, a final message flashing in jagged letters, "Break the loop." His chest heaved violently as the hand's fingers curled tighter, scraping deep furrows into the wood. Another hand burst through nearby, then another, until dozens clawed their way up from the floor, their nails clicking against the boards like insects' legs. He pushed himself up on shaking arms, his muscles screaming with exhaustion, and lunged for the phone. His fingers brushed it just as one of the hands slammed down where it had been, splinters flying into the air. He scrambled backward, clutching the phone with trembling hands, his mind racing wildly. Break the loop. How? The first door. He was miles and decades away from that house. His younger self long gone, untouchable. Or was he? The thought surfaced unbidden. What if I can still reach him? What if this isn't just memory, but connection? The idea felt insane, but nothing about this night had obeyed the rules of sanity. The knocks returned, thunderous now, shaking the entire apartment. The doorframe cracked violently. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Let us in. Let you in." He pressed the phone tight to his chest and forced his shaking legs to hold him as he staggered toward the kitchen. His eyes darted to the drawer, where he knew he kept the hammer. If this was all happening because of a door, maybe destroying anyone would be enough. But deep down he knew it wouldn't. This wasn't about wood and hinges. It was about choice. As he reached for the drawer, the lights in the apartment flared blinding white, before blowing out all at once, plunging him into thick, suffocating darkness. His phone screen provided the only light, faint and flickering like a dying candle. He gripped it tighter, knuckles white, and whispered hoarsely, "Please, tell me how." The device buzzed weakly in his hand before a new message appeared, barely legible through the cracked glass. "You are the door." His breath caught, the words lodging deep in his chest like splinters. Him. He shook his head violently, backing away as cold dread surged through his veins. No, no, that wasn't possible. But even as he denied it, the cracks spreading across the walls deepened, forming jagged outlines, doorways, all of them shaped like him. His own silhouette burned into the apartment's surfaces, each one a perfect, hollow outline of his body. The voices whispered again, softer now, but infinitely more dangerous. "You let us in when you let yourself out." His mind screamed as the truth clawed its way to the surface. It wasn't just about opening door. It was about what entered him the first time he reached for that knob as a child. The thing hadn't come through the door. It had come through him. His older self had tried to warn him in every cycle, but the warnings had never been enough. Somehow, Each version of him made the same mistake, trying to shut the door from the outside when the infection was already within. He staggered back, clutching the phone so hard the screen cracked further. Another message appeared, stark and final: break yourself or become us. His knees buckled as the door before him exploded inward, a wave of darkness surging through the apartment like a living tide. Dozens of hands shot out, grasping, clawing. A voice, his voice, roared through the chaos. Come knock, knock. The darkness rushed in like a living wave, devouring everything in its path with impossible speed. The hands clawed at the walls, the floor, the ceiling, tearing deep gouges as they reached for him, their nails clicking and scraping in a maddening rhythm that mirrored the knocks now hammering through his skull. He stumbled back, his heel catching on a loose board, sending him crashing hard against the counter. Pain shot up his spine, but he barely felt it over the cold realization coursing through him. There was no place left to run. This wasn't just his apartment anymore. It wasn't even his timeline. The boundaries of space and memory had dissolved, replaced by a shifting nightmare of doorways and shadows, and versions of himself trapped in endless permutations of the same moment. He could hear them now, his other selves screaming in the distance, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus of regret and despair. Don't open it. Don't open it. Don't. The words blurred, fractured, collapsing into static as the darkness surged closer, tendrils curling around his ankles with icy strength. He tried to kick free, but they only tightened, burning cold against his skin. His phone buzzed violently in his hand, the cracked screen flashing another message. You're out of time. He fumbled with the device, his sweat-slick fingers slipping as he desperately tried to respond. But the keyboard wouldn't appear. The screen pulsed red, then black, then red again as more words blinked into existence. Break the host. Now, a scream tore from his throat as he felt one of the shadowy hands clamp tight around his calf, its icy grip so strong it felt like his bone might snap. The creature's voice rumbled from all around him, its many layers overlapping, until it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. It's always you. You are the door. You are the knock. You are the answer. His heart pounded so hard, it felt like it might burst from his chest, every beat sending sharp pain radiating up his neck and into his skull. He clawed at the tendril wrapped around his leg, but his fingers passed through it like smoke. The apartment shifted violently, the walls buckling and warping as doorways blossomed across every surface. Each one was identical, a plain wooden door with a brass knob and a faint pulsing glow seeping through the cracks. He spun wildly, disoriented, as more doors appeared, crowding the small space until he was surrounded. Behind each door, faint shapes stirred, silhouettes of people pacing, waiting, whispering, and he knew, with a sick, sinking certainty, that they were all him, versions of himself in various stages of decay, some older, some barely recognizable as human, all of them trapped, pounding and clawing and screaming silently for release. There is no outside, the voice whispered now, softer, almost tender. There is no escape, only the door, only the knock. The tendrils snaked higher, wrapping around his waist, his chest, squeezing until his ribs creaked ominously. He gasped, fighting for breath, as the pressure mounted. The phone in his hand vibrated violently, then went dark. The darkness closed in tighter, the air growing colder with every passing second. His teeth chattered uncontrollably, his muscles trembling violently as he struggled against the grip of the shadows. Another doorway appeared directly in front of him, closer than the others. Its surface rippled like liquid glass, and he saw his reflection staring back at him. Only it wasn't really him. It was older, hollow-eyed, gaunt, skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, lips cracked and bloody. His doppelganger's eyes burned faintly, with pinprick light, as its mouth opened soundlessly, mouthing the words he now knew by heart. "Don't open it," but the shadows surged forward suddenly, slamming him against the door with bone-jarring force. The wood splintered under his weight as the brass knob turned of its own accord, the gap widening to reveal nothing but infinite blackness and a faint whisper of breathless laughter. "You already did." His scream tore through the darkness as a blinding white light flared from the phone, searing his vision. The tendrils recoiled instantly, hissing and retreating back into the writhing void. He collapsed to the floor, gasping, clutching his chest as his heartbeat pounded erratically. The phone flickered weakly in his hand, a single word etched across the shattered screen in stark, desperate letters: "Jump." Confusion surged through him, but before he could react, the floor beneath him gave way. He fell, not down, not sideways, but through, a sensation of plunging headlong into endless space, doorways and hands and shadows spinning past him in a dizzying spiral. His own voice echoed from every direction, fragmented and overlapping. "Don't open it. Don't open it. Don't." His body slammed hard against solid ground, pain radiating up his side as his vision swam. When his sight cleared, he wasn't in his apartment anymore. He wasn't even sure he was in his own time. The air was thick and heavy with dust, the walls around him lined with doors of every shape and size. Some were ancient and crumbling, others modern and gleaming. All of them pulsed faintly, alive with the same sickly glow. He pushed himself up, on shaking arms, wincing at the sharp pain in his ribs. The phone buzzed one final time in his hand, its cracked screen barely legible now. The first door is here. His breath hitched as he turned slowly, his eyes falling on a small, unassuming door at the end of the hall. It was familiar, too familiar. He had seen it before, not here, but years ago in his childhood home. The memory returned in full, sharp and vivid, his 8-year-old hand hovering over that brass knob, heart pounding as 3 slow knocks reverberated from the other side. This was his chance, maybe his only one. If he could close it now, really close it. Maybe he could end this. Maybe he could finally break the cycle. But even as he staggered toward the door, a whisper coiled through the air like smoke, soft and mocking. "You won't. You never do." His fingers curled around the knob, slick with sweat, as the faint sound of breathing drifted from beyond. His trembling fingers tightened around the brass knob, the metal warm beneath his touch, as though something alive pressed its palm against the other side. A faint breath brushed through the crack in the wood, damp and sour, carrying with it the echo of his own shallow gasps. He stood frozen, 1,000 racing thoughts collapsing into a single deafening truth. This is it. This is where it all began. The whispers behind the door grew louder now, layers upon layers of voices overlapping in perfect, sickening harmony. Some were familiar, his parents, his childhood self, his older self, but others were utterly alien, guttural and wet, speaking in tongues that twisted his stomach to hear. "We're waiting." The words slithered through his ears and straight into his spine. His knuckles whitened as he turned the knob slightly, wood creaking beneath his palm. His chest tightened, breath hitching. "Break it." or open it. Choose. But choosing felt impossible because both options led to terror, to failure. To him, the door shuddered violently as if reacting to his hesitation. The cracks along its edges widened slightly, and from them oozed a black, viscous liquid that smelled of rust and rotting wood. It dripped onto the floor, sizzling faintly as it ate into the warped boards. He staggered back, heart hammering, only for a pale hand, small, childlike, suddenly to slip through one of the gaps. It pressed flat against the wood, as a small voice whispered, trembling and tearful, "Please let me in. I'm so scared." His stomach lurched. That voice, his own voice as a child, 8 years old, the exact pitch and cadence, every quiver of terror etched into it like a wound. His vision swam, tears burning his eyes as memories surged in jagged flashes. His childhood bedroom, the nightlight flickering weakly, the cold air pressing against his back as he stood staring at this very door. The knocking had come slow and steady, followed by this voice, begging, pleading, and then nothing. He had blocked out what came next, but now it was here again. "Help me, please." His knees threatened to buckle as his grip on the phone tightened painfully. The cracked screen flickered faintly in the dark, a single word flashing like a heartbeat. "Choose." The small hand on the other side pressed harder, pale fingers curling slightly against the wood. Another voice joined it, older now, more guttural. "Don't listen. It's not you. It's us." The voices multiplied in a rising chorus, some pleading, some screaming, others laughing with deep, guttural mirth. "Open, break, open, break, open, break." His hands shook violently as the knob twisted fully under his grip. The door pulsed faintly, its surface stretching outward like a membrane, as though something enormous pressed its face against the other side. Eyes, so many eyes, blinking wetly in the darkness beyond. He could feel them watching, waiting for his decision. His heartbeat was a drumbeat in his ears, each thud reverberating with the echo of knocks long past. The air thickened around him, heavy and electric like the charge before a storm. His body screamed at him to act, but his mind clawed desperately for an answer that didn't exist. If he opened it, he invited it in again, doomed to repeat the cycle. If he broke it, would it be enough? Could you really shatter a door that was never physical to begin with? His phone buzzed weakly one last time, and he glanced down through blurred vision to see the final message. "The door is you." His stomach dropped, bile rising in his throat as the truth settled like lead in his gut. He wasn't meant to open or break the door. He was the door. Every choice he made, every hesitation, every fear, they had all built this threshold through which it entered, over and over, unbroken. To stop it meant stopping himself. The child's voice wept now, frantic and desperate. "Please, don't leave me here." But it was wrong. The tone twisted slightly, the words slipping into a low, guttural growl that no child could make. "Let us in." The pale hand on the door warped grotesquely, fingers elongating, nails blackening into claws as the skin split and peeled away. His scream broke the thick air as he hurled himself backward, raising the phone above his head with both hands. It wasn't logic that guided him anymore. It was raw, animal instinct. With a cry that tore his throat raw, he brought the phone crashing down against the side of his own head. The world detonated in a burst of searing white light. Agony ripped through his skull as his body convulsed violently, his knees giving way. He slammed hard against the floor as shadows erupted from his mouth. His eyes, his ears writhing tendrils of black smoke that clawed and shrieked as they were torn free. The door before him splintered violently, its form twisting and collapsing inward. As the hands withdrew, the voices howling in anguish. No, no, no. The apartment itself quaked violently, its walls crumbling into nothingness as light poured in from unseen cracks. The darkness recoiled with a furious, keening wail as his consciousness fractured. He saw himself, not one self, but infinite selves, each trapped behind doors of their own making. He watched as, one by one, the doors shattered into blinding light, and the figures within them dissolved like sand scattered in the wind. He felt himself unraveling too, pieces of his being peeling away in radiant fragments. The pain was unspeakable, but laced with something else: relief. Freedom. The voices grew faint, their chorus breaking apart into dissonant, dying whispers. We'll find another door. We always do. But for now the sound faded into nothingness, leaving only silence. His body felt light, almost weightless, as though he were drifting in a vast, empty expanse. And then, darkness, not suffocating this time, not malicious, just quiet, gentle darkness. The silence was almost unbearable. It pressed down on him like the thick, suffocating air before a summer storm, only heavier, as though the world itself were holding its breath. He blinked into the darkness, his body limp and unresponsive, floating in a void that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. No light, no sound, no sense of self. He wasn't even sure if he was breathing. A faint, metallic taste lingered on his tongue, sharp and acrid like blood, and his thoughts came slow and sluggish, like they were wading through syrup. Had he done it, broken the loop, or was this another layer, a new prison designed to look like freedom? Somewhere deep in his chest, a hollow ache pulsed in time with his heartbeat, each thump ringing louder in the emptiness. Then, faintly, so faintly he almost missed it, came a sound. A knock. Just one, soft, barely audible, but it echoed through the darkness like a gunshot, sending a sharp jolt of terror rippling through his still form. His breath caught. His limbs twitched weakly, muscles screaming in protest as he forced his arms to move. Another knock followed, louder, closer. He felt the air shift slightly against his skin, the faintest whisper of movement. He wasn't alone here. His eyes darted wildly, searching for anything. Light, a shape, an edge, but the void remained absolute. The knocks came again. 3, slow and deliberate, the sound vibrating in his bones more than his ears. A chill settled over him, deep and invasive, as if something enormous had turned its gaze his way. He couldn't see it, but he felt it, felt its weight, its presence, heavy and ancient and patient. You never closed the first door. The words were soft, almost gentle, but layered with countless voices, each whisper overlapping into a sound, so dense it was impossible to pass where one ended and another began. He tried to speak, but his throat locked tight, no air moving past his lips. You broke yourself, not us, not it. The voices grew louder, each syllable thick with amusement and hunger. We warned you. The door isn't wood. It isn't steel. It's you. You can break the frame, shatter the hinges, but as long as you breathe, it stands. A scream clawed its way up his throat, silent and choked. As the void shifted and rippled, shapes moved just beyond perception. Tall, spindly, too many limbs, and hundreds of tiny, glinting eyes blinked open, surrounding him in a sphere of cold, watchful stares. The realization struck him like a physical blow. He hadn't escaped. He had never even been close. All he had done was pull back another layer of the thing's design, peeling away the illusion of choice. Each loop, Each decision, every scream and plea, they were all bricks in the same endless hallway. "We don't come through the door," the voices murmured now, circling him in a tightening spiral. "We are the door. You let us in when you let yourself out." A wet, gurgling laugh rippled through the black, shaking his bones until his teeth ached. His body convulsed as unseen hands brushed against his skin, cold, slick, and impossibly strong, guiding him forward though he couldn't see where. He fought to resist, but his limbs betrayed him, moving of their own accord with stiff, puppet-like jerks. His foot struck something solid. Wood, a door. The brass knob gleamed faintly in the darkness, pulsing with a sickly yellow light like a heartbeat. It was his childhood door again, always the same door. No matter how far he ran, no matter how many cycles he shattered, it was always waiting at the end. This time, the knocking came from both sides. From the outside, deep, booming thuds like fists the size of houses, and from within, faint but frantic, as if someone trapped behind the door was pounding to get out. "Help me, please, I'm still in here." The voice was his again, younger, breaking with desperation and fear. He squeezed his eyes shut as tears spilled hot down his face. He remembered this moment too well. 8 years old, standing barefoot in the dark, the cold creeping across the floor, the knocking, and that voice on the other side, begging him to let it in. But this wasn't just memory. It was a mirror, a loop within the loop. He wasn't 8 anymore. He was both the boy and the man, trapped on either side of the same cursed threshold. "You can't save him," the voices purred, "because he's already you, and you're already us." A sudden weight pressed against the door from the other side, bulging the wood inward until it cracked and splintered. Black liquid seeped through the gaps, sizzling as it hit the unseen floor. Fingers appeared, long, thin, tipped with claws that scraped deep gouges into the wood. The door shook violently under the pressure, as a guttural moan echoed from beyond. "Let us out." The words were screamed now, deafening, vibrating the air, until his eardrums felt like they might rupture. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his head, bypassing flesh and bone. The knob turned slowly under its own power, a low, metallic groan filling the space as it clicked halfway. His breath came fast and ragged, chest heaving with each shallow gulp of cold air. "Don't let them out," he whispered hoarsely, unsure if he was speaking to himself or the child version of him on the other side. His hands trembled violently, reaching for the knob. The voices crescendoed into a deafening roar, their tones clashing in a discordant symphony of hunger and rage. Too late, too late, too late, too late. The door exploded inward with a sound like shattering glass and snapping bone, a tidal wave of darkness rushing through and engulfing him completely. He was weightless again, spinning violently as images flashed past, memories, dreams, moments from countless lives, all versions of him standing before this door. Some opened it, some didn't, but they all ended the same, screaming. His own face twisted in terror, rotting, melting, stretched thin across 1,000 hollow skulls. The voice came again, louder now, almost triumphant. "We are the knock, you are the answer." His vision swam as light, flickered weakly in the void, a distant pinprick that grew slowly larger, brighter. For a moment, hope flared deep in his chest, but as the light expanded, he saw it for what it was, another door. The door loomed ahead, glowing faintly in the void like a dying star, its brass knob pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. But this wasn't the door from his childhood. Not exactly. Its edges were wrong, twisted, organic, as though it had been grown rather than built. Veins pulsed faintly beneath the surface, carrying a thick, dark fluid that moved sluggishly in jagged streams. He felt it staring at him, not with eyes but with a terrible, suffocating awareness. His feet moved of their own accord, dragging him forward, despite every muscle in his body screaming to turn back. With each step, whispers seeped into his ears like warm breath. This one is older, this one is deeper. The voices overlapped endlessly, some calm, others shrieking, all of them his. His knees buckled, but invisible hands caught him, holding him upright, guiding him ever closer to the pulsating threshold. He choked on a sob as memories bled together. His childhood door, his apartment door, infinite other doors, spanning countless lifetimes. All the same, all leading here. You never closed it, you only walked through. As he stumbled closer, the air grew thick and wet, clinging to his skin like a second layer. Every breath tasted of iron and decay, thick enough to make him gag. The whispers grew louder, more distinct now, forming words that stabbed into his mind like nails. Each knock is a call, each answer is a birth. He pressed his hands over his ears, but the voices only grew clearer. We aren't outside, we're inside. You carried us with you. His stomach churned violently as images flickered across the door's surface. His own face reflected back at him, distorted and bloated, eyes black pits, leaking oily tears. The door throbbed once, hard enough to rattle the invisible ground beneath his feet. Then came the knocking, 3 deliberate thuds, deep and resonant, shaking his bones. A pause. Then 3 more. His breath hitched as a faint crack appeared in the door, and something pale and spindly pressed against the gap from the other side. We're ready. The words coiled tight around his brain like barbed wire, digging deeper with each repetition. His knees gave out as he dropped hard to the unseen floor, his palms scraping against a surface that felt neither solid nor liquid. His fingers came away slick with a dark substance that smoked faintly in the cold air. The door shuddered again, and the pale shape on the other side pressed harder, forcing the crack wider. A single eye appeared, lidless and wet, its gaze locking onto him with a hunger so vast and alien his mind recoiled in terror. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The eye blinked slowly, oozing black tears that sizzled as they hit the floor. A voice, not a whisper this time, but a deep, sonorous growl, rumbled through the void. You are the threshold. You are the invitation. You are the knock. The sound vibrated through his teeth, his bones, down to the very marrow. His vision blurred as his chest convulsed violently. He coughed, black fluid spraying from his lips in thick, ropey strands. His phone buzzed weakly in his pocket. The sound felt absurdly small against the enormity of what surrounded him. Trembling, he fumbled it out, the cracked screen flickering with static before displaying a single message. It's not too late. A sob tore free from his throat, equal parts hope and despair. How, he thought wildly, tears streaking his face. How can it not be too late? As if answering, a second message appeared. The first knock wasn't theirs, it was yours. Confusion roared through his foggy mind. He didn't understand. Had he knocked? As a child? On what? On whom? His stomach turned violently as a faint memory surfaced. His 8-year-old self standing before the door, not waiting, but knocking 3 times. Then again, a chill ripped down his spine as realization struck. He hadn't been responding to a call. He had been making one. The door's surface writhed violently now, faces pressing outward from the wood, like trapped souls screaming in silence. Hands clawed at the edges, splinters flying as black ichor sprayed across the floor. The eye blinked again, and the voice roared. "You called," we answered. The words were a physical force, slamming into his body and pinning him to the floor. His ribs creaked under the pressure, pain exploding through his chest with every shallow breath. His phone vibrated again, the screen flashing urgently. Break the call, break the knock. His hand trembled violently as he raised it, his fingers curling instinctively into a fist. He didn't understand how. How could striking anything here end this? But some deep, primal part of him whispered that it was true, that it had to be. The door moaned deeply, a sound so low it felt like the universe itself groaning in pain. He staggered upright, muscles screaming, his legs barely holding his weight. The eye on the other side widened in anticipation, its dark pupil dilating into a swirling vortex. The voice came again, louder now, layered with thousands of his own screams. Door or doorway, choose. His chest felt tight, his vision tunneling as he raised his fist higher. He screamed, wordless roar, then brought it down against the door with all the strength left in his body. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through the void. The door cracked. Not much, but enough. The eye blinked rapidly, confusion flickering across its grotesque surface. The voices shrieked in unison, some in pain, others in rage. No, not this way. Again he struck, and again. Each blow sent more cracks, spiderwebbing across the door's surface. His knuckles split, blood and black ichor spraying in all directions, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The door buckled, moaning like a wounded animal, as pale, clawed hands scrambled to hold it together from the other side. He screamed with each strike, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face as his fist became raw and bloody. No, more. The words tore from his throat like a war cry. The final blow landed with a sickening crunch, and the door shattered into splinters of light that exploded outward in a blinding wave. The void erupted in chaos. The hands withdrew, the faces melted, the eye burst into black liquid that hissed and evaporated. The voices screamed one last time, high, keening wails of rage and hunger, before cutting off abruptly. Silence fell, absolute and heavy. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, his chest heaving with each ragged breath. His bloodied hands trembled violently in his lap. Then, faintly, a new sound began, a slow, deliberate knocking. Not loud, not insistent, just 3 soft taps echoing through the nothingness. The knocking didn't stop. It came again. 3 slow, deliberate strikes reverberating in the darkness like distant thunder. He flinched violently, his raw, bloodied hands clenching instinctively. The sound wasn't coming from one place anymore. It echoed from everywhere, above, below, inside his skull. His breath hitched as the silence between the knocks seemed to stretch wider each time, a space pregnant with unspeakable anticipation. Something was waiting for him to respond, but he wouldn't. He couldn't. Not after what he'd seen. The shattered remnants of the door drifted around him like glowing embers, suspended in the void, slowly fading to black. But the momentary calm was an illusion. He felt it deep in his bones, a vibration, subtle but growing. The universe was holding its breath, trembling on the edge of collapse. He stumbled to his feet, each movement stiff and painful, as though his body wasn't entirely his anymore. His reflection appeared in front of him, flickering faintly on an unseen surface. It was his face, but older, gaunt, hollow-eyed, skin grey and cracked like old porcelain. Its lips parted, and in a hoarse, dead voice, it whispered, "You're already gone." The ground, or whatever passed for it, shuddered violently beneath him. Splinters of reality spider-webbed outward from his feet, glowing lines of light that cracked and buckled as the void itself seemed to tear open. Through the gaps, he glimpsed fragments of countless worlds, a child's bedroom soaked in moonlight, a decaying apartment hallway, endless rows of doors stretching into infinity. Each scene flickered for only a heartbeat before vanishing into the swirling maelstrom. His stomach churned violently as vertigo gripped him, the sensation of falling without moving. "We told you," the voice said again, closer this time, almost inside his ears. "It was never the door, it was you. You can't break what you are." He screamed, clutching his head as a sharp electric pain ripped through his skull. His memories fractured like glass under a hammer, flashes of his childhood, his first apartment, his reflection on that cursed camera, all bleeding together in a sickening swirl. His own voice echoed through the chaos, desperate and broken. "Don't open it, don't open it, don't open it, don't." Oh, the knocks came again. Louder this time, the sound so massive it vibrated in his teeth, his bones, his very cells. His legs buckled as he dropped to his knees, hands pressed to his ears. But it didn't matter. The sound was inside him now. Each knock reverberated through his heart like a second pulse, steady and inevitable. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Again, again, until there's nothing left to answer. His older reflection stepped closer, its hollow eyes leaking black tears that sizzled as they struck the unseen floor. "We tried to warn you, every loop, every time, but you don't listen. You never listen." Its cracked lips twisted into a grotesque grin. "You can't warn yourself when you are the warning." The world around them convulsed violently, pieces breaking away into the void like shrapnel from an exploding planet. A howling wind tore past, carrying faint overlapping whispers, his own voice in 1,000 permutations, screaming, pleading, laughing. A sudden violent lurch sent him sprawling face first into the slick, pulsing surface beneath him. His skin burned where it touched, as though he'd pressed bare flesh against scalding metal. He scrambled backward on his hands and knees, but there was nowhere left to go. The cracks had grown wider, the glowing veins spilling thick, black ichor that hissed and steamed. The air tasted like ash and iron, heavy in his lungs. His phone buzzed faintly in his pocket, and he fumbled for it, the cracked screen glowing weakly through the encroaching darkness. The door was never closed. Another message flickered into view. The door is never closed. His blood ran cold as a realization bloomed in his mind like a cancer. There was no end to this, no escape. Breaking the door had only unsealed everything at once, collapsing all the layers of the loop into a single screaming moment. He was both the knocker and the one answering, the door and the key, the vessel and the void. The reflection began to laugh, a low, rasping sound that built slowly into a chorus of his voices, overlapping endlessly. From every shattered fragment of reality, more of his reflections emerged. They poured out of the broken cracks, climbing over each other in a grotesque parody of life. Each one wore his face but twisted, decayed, screaming in agony, or grinning wide with blackened teeth. Hundreds, thousands, They surrounded him in a tightening circle, their voices merging into a single deafening chant. Knock, knock, knock. He clamped his hands over his ears as his body convulsed violently, blood dripping from his nose and ears. But the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, faster, until it was no longer a series of knocks, but one continuous, thunderous roar. The void itself pulsed with each beat, the cracks tearing wider, spilling light and darkness in alternating waves. Through the chaos, a single thought pierced his mind, sharp and clear like a blade. You're not meant to survive this. He didn't know whose voice it was, his own, or something else entirely. But the truth of it sank deep into his bones. This wasn't about winning, it was about erasure. He staggered to his feet, his legs trembling violently, as the circle of reflections pressed closer, their hollow eyes burning. The phone in his hand buzzed one last time, its cracked screen flashing the final message: become the Canuck or end it. His stomach lurched violently as the space around him folded inward, collapsing like a dying star. His hands trembled as he raised them, palms outward, fingers splayed. The reflections lunged forward as one, their mouths open impossibly wide, a chorus of his voices screaming, "We're here." The reflections lunged all at once, their mouths stretching impossibly wide, the sound of their collective scream folding in on itself until it became a single piercing note that threatened to tear him apart. He staggered back, clutching his skull as the noise clawed at his mind, threatening to rip it in half. His vision blurred, the shapes around him smearing into streaks of black and grey. He felt them touching him, cold, slick hands gripping his arms, his neck, his face, as they whispered in perfect unison. "You are the answer. You are the question. You are the knock." His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the unseen ground, the phone slipping from his grasp and clattering uselessly away. A dark warmth spread up his arms, and he looked down to see their hands merging with his flesh, veins of black ichor spiderwebbing across his skin. He screamed, a raw animal sound, but no air left his lungs. His reflection's hollow eyes stared back at him, inches from his own, and for the first time, it spoke aloud in his own voice. "This is how it begins. This is how it ends." The void pulsed violently as more cracks appeared, tearing wider with each thrum of the reflection's chant. Through the gaps, he saw glimpses of other worlds, endless hallways, spiraling staircases, infinite doors opening and closing in perfect rhythm. In every reality, he was there, knocking, always knocking. His breath came in short, shallow gasps as a terrible clarity seared through him. There had never been anyone else. No monster on the other side, no entity invading from beyond. It was him. It had always been him. His childhood knock, that innocent moment, had rippled outward, creating a cascade of loops, each one birthing and feeding on the next. "You are the echo," his reflection whispered now, its lips brushing his ear, "and you are the void." The hands gripped tighter, pulling him upward as the ground fell away beneath his feet. He dangled in the center of nothingness, suspended by the countless versions of himself, their cold fingers digging into his skin until blood blossomed in dark, spreading stains. A low rumble vibrated through his chest, growing louder until it became a deafening roar that swallowed even his own screams. The reflections' mouths widened further, their teeth lengthening into jagged, needle-like points. "It's time," they chanted in one voice. The sound so massive it vibrated the cracks of reality themselves. He writhed violently, his limbs jerking as black ichor poured from his eyes and ears. His body convulsed as something vast and cold began to seep into him, filling the hollow spaces where his fear used to live. "You knocked. Now you answer." The words rang out like a death knell, and his vision went white as pain lanced through every nerve ending in his body. His bones felt like they were shattering from the inside out, his flesh peeling and reforming in ways it should not. The void split wide open, light and darkness colliding in a screaming maelstrom. The reflections shrieked with glee as they poured themselves into him, their forms dissolving into writhing streams of black smoke that ripped into his mouth, his eyes, his skin, his back arched violently as the last of them vanished, leaving him alone, utterly still. Slowly he lowered to the cracked surface, his feet touching down with a faint hiss. His chest rose and fell in calm, measured breaths. The phone buzzed faintly at his feet. He picked it up with steady hands. The screen was whole now, uncracked, gleaming with pristine brightness. A single message pulsed across it: "Welcome home." A door appeared before him, growing from the void like a blooming flower. But this time there was no brass knob, no wood or hinges, just a shifting liquid threshold that pulsed with an inner light. It reflected his face, but not as it had been before. His eyes now glowed faintly, pinpricks of pale fire, and his skin shimmered like oil on water. He raised his hand and placed it flat against the door's surface. It rippled under his touch, warm and yielding. On the other side, a shape stirred, familiar yet alien, small and trembling. A voice rose from beyond the threshold. His own voice, younger, fragile, terrified. "Is someone there? Please don't open it." He froze. For a moment, the faintest flicker of humanity surged through the thing he had become. Then his lips parted in a slow, alien smile. He leaned close to the door and whispered, in a voice layered with 1,000 echoes, "You already did." The knocks began again, slow, deliberate, louder than before. The cycle wasn't ending, it was restarting. Only this time, he was on the other side, waiting, watching, knocking. The first knock came at 3:03 a.m. It was soft, so soft that for a moment he thought he'd imagined it. He lay still in bed, staring at the faint glow of his phone screen on the nightstand. The numbers stared back. 3:03. His apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of old wood settling. But then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, not on the door, on the wall. His head turned automatically, eyes fixing on the pale stretch of plaster to his right. His breath caught in his throat. He waited. Nothing. His heart thudded heavily in his chest, each beat impossibly loud in the quiet. "It's just the pipes," he told himself, or a neighbor, or something equally mundane. But deep down something colder stirred, a faint unease prickling the hairs on the back of his neck. The silence seemed too complete now, pressing in from every direction. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling as he tried to steady his breathing. But then it came a third time. Knock, knock, knock. This time he sat up. The sound wasn't random, it wasn't faint, it was precise, deliberate. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, bare feet meeting the cool wood floor. His phone vibrated softly on the nightstand. A message notification. He snatched it up with trembling fingers. The screen showed only 2 words. "Don't answer." No contact name, no number. Just the message sitting stark against the dark background. His stomach lurched. He turned his head slowly toward the wall again. Nothing. But now his ears strained in the silence, trying to catch any hint of movement, any shuffle of feet or breath. His apartment was too still, too quiet. He thought about calling someone. But who and what would he even say? There's knocking on my wall, and my phone told me not to answer. They'd laugh. He'd laugh if it wasn't for the cold knot coiling tighter in his gut. The phone vibrated again. Another message. It knows you're awake. His breath came faster now, shallow and ragged. The silence felt thicker than before, as though the very air in the apartment had stopped moving. The walls seemed to press in slightly, the shadows deepening at the edges of his vision. He stood, his bare feet whispering against the floorboards as he crept toward the wall. His hand hovered just inches from the pale surface, hesitating. What the hell am I doing? He thought wildly. Then faintly, from the other side, please, let me in. His stomach twisted violently. The voice was soft, trembling, almost childlike. But there was something off about it, something wrong. He stepped back, shaking his head. No, it wasn't possible. He didn't know who or what was on the other side, but every instinct screamed at him to stay away. His phone buzzed again. It's not a child. He froze. His skin crawled as the words burned in his mind. The knocking returned, louder now, 3 heavy thuds that rattled the pictures on the wall. He staggered back, heart hammering against his ribs. The voice came again, sharper this time, almost pleading. I'm cold. I'm scared. Please don't leave me here. Tears stung his eyes as a sick wave of fear surged through him. His phone vibrated once more. If you open it, you become it. His knees threatened to buckle. He didn't understand. Open what? There was no door here, only a wall. But even as the thought formed, a faint outline appeared on the plaster. A rectangular shape, faint at first, but growing sharper with each heartbeat. A door. His mind rebelled against it. It hadn't been there seconds ago. It couldn't be there. Yet the brass knob glinted faintly in the darkness, as real as the trembling breath in his lungs. His phone buzzed violently in his hand. Don't touch the knob. The knocks grew violent now, shaking the entire wall as dust drifted from the ceiling. His breath came in sharp gasps as his back hit the opposite wall, eyes locked on the impossible door. The voice beyond it sobbed pitifully. Please, I don't want to be alone anymore. He clutched his phone tight, his knuckles whitening. The screen flickered briefly, then displayed a final message. It's already inside. His heart stopped. A sound, a faint wet scraping, rose behind him. Slowly, so slowly, he turned his head. There, in the corner of his bedroom, something moved. A tall, thin shadow, its joints bending the wrong way, eyes glowing faintly, like dying embers. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, and a chorus of voices poured out in perfect unison. Knock, knock. He ran, every breath tearing at his lungs, every step sounding like a gunshot in the hollow silence of the building. His bare feet smacked against the floor, and his legs burned with effort, but the sound behind him kept pace. Not footsteps exactly, but something softer, wetter, like fingertips dragging along the walls as they followed. The whisper came again, faint but clear, winding itself around his thoughts, like a snake tightening its coils. Knock, knock. His vision swam as panic clawed at his throat, every instinct screaming for him to get out, to run until there was no breath left in his body. But no matter how fast he moved, the hallway seemed to stretch impossibly far, doors multiplying on either side, each one shuddering faintly, as though something immense pressed against them from within. The air grew heavier with every step, thick and warm, carrying the faint metallic tang of blood. He felt it now, not just following him but seeping into him, coiling in the hollow spaces of his chest, his gut, his mind. His phone buzzed violently in his hand. Somehow, impossibly, the cracked screen glared back at him with a single line of text. Too late. It's already inside. The stairwell loomed ahead, but it was wrong. Stretched vertically, its steps twisting impossibly, like an Escher painting, the railings warping into sharp, spiraling shapes. He didn't care. He threw himself forward, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his knees screaming in protest with each pounding impact. The lights above flickered and pulsed like a dying heartbeat, and shadows stretched along the walls, growing long, thin fingers that seemed to curl toward him as he passed. His breath came in shallow gasps, his chest tightening as though a pair of invisible hands were squeezing his ribs. A faint creak echoed below, a sound that might have been a door opening or a neck snapping. He froze mid-step, his knuckles white against the cool metal railing, his eyes wide and searching the darkness below. Then he saw it. A figure, tall, thin, unmoving, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, eyes burning faintly like embers. It didn't step toward him. It didn't have to. The air shifted, and the thing was closer, impossibly closer, its long fingers twitching slightly, as though eager to reach out. His phone buzzed again, the screen flashing violently. Don't look at it. But it was too late. He already had. Spinning, he launched himself upward, climbing the warped stairs as fast as his body would allow. Behind him, the whispering grew louder, layered voices overlapping and merging into a single sound that pressed against his mind, like cold water filling his skull. Knock, knock, knock. You hear it. You are it. He stumbled, his shins slamming against the step, pain exploding up his leg. But he didn't stop, couldn't stop. His vision blurred as tears stung his eyes. When he burst back into the hallway, it was no longer the hallway he remembered. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of dark fluid running beneath cracked plaster like diseased arteries. The doors had grown taller, impossibly narrow, and each rattled violently as unseen fists pounded against them in perfect unison. His mouth went dry as his gaze locked on one particular door. It bulged outward, as though something enormous pressed against it, and a soft voice slipped through the cracks, trembling but unmistakable. Please, let me in. I'm so cold, so alone. The sound froze him in place. It was a child's voice, small and fragile, and yet something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand rigid. His phone buzzed violently in his sweat-slicked hand. It's not a child. His chest heaved as he stumbled back a step. The knocking resumed, louder this time. The force of it rattled the light fixtures overhead, sending faint dust motes drifting down in lazy spirals. His head whipped toward the emergency exit at the end of the hall. Salvation. Escape. He sprinted for it, ignoring the shuddering doors as hands, impossibly long, impossibly thin, began forcing their way through the cracks, their claw-like fingers scraping deep grooves in the wooden panels. The chanting rose, almost joyful now. Answer, answer. His hand shot out for the exit door's handle, but the moment his skin brushed the cool brass, he recoiled violently. It was warm, alive, and an eye bloomed in its center, lidless, wet, staring directly into him. His heart jackhammered in his chest as he stumbled backward, his shoulders slamming into the opposite wall. From every direction, the reflections began to emerge. They poured from the broken doors, crawling over one another like insects. Each wore his face, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths stretched impossibly wide as they howled wordless screams. Their voices merged, louder and louder. Open, open, open. His phone vibrated one last time, the screen flickering a final message. If you open it, you become it. His knees buckled. A faint, wet scraping sound echoed in the corner of his bedroom. He turned, tears blurring his vision, to see a tall shadow stretching from floor to ceiling, its joints bending the wrong way, its mouth opening wide to unleash the chorus of voices. Knock, knock, knock. He couldn't tell if he was screaming anymore. The sound in his ears had grown too loud, a deafening roar of overlapping voices that each spoke with his own tone, but twisted, broken, layered until meaning dissolved into raw noise. The reflections surged forward, their clawed hands reaching, their mouths yawning impossibly wide, 100 pairs of eyes burning like dying coals. He pressed himself against the cold wall, his fingernails digging into the cracked plaster until they split and bled. But the wall pulsed faintly beneath his hands, soft and warm like skin stretched too tight over bone. The hallway seemed to breathe, each slow exhale bringing the stench of rot and iron. He tried to move, but his legs no longer obeyed. His phone buzzed weakly in his pocket, its glow the only thing still familiar. With trembling fingers, he raised it, the cracked screen flickering as a new message appeared. You were never meant to leave. The words struck him like a blow, and for a moment his chest ached with a grief so deep it eclipsed even his terror. This was no longer escape. This was a trap closing tight around him, and worse, some part of him remembered building it. The reflections slowed their advance, circling him in a tightening spiral. Their movements were jerky, marionette-like, as if their bones bent the wrong way under invisible strings. They began to knock now, not with hands, but with their heads. One by one, they pressed their foreheads to the warped doors, then slammed forward in unison. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. The sound vibrated through the walls, through his bones, until his teeth chattered with the force of it. With each blow, the doors splintered further, black ichor oozing from the cracks in thick, sluggish streams. It smelled sweet at first, cloying, sickly, before the sharp tang of decay overtook it. His lungs seized as the air grew heavier, thick enough to choke on. The reflections spoke in perfect chorus, their voices rising like a hymn. You knocked first. You made us. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the pulsing floor. The sensation beneath his palms was no longer wood but flesh, warm and damp. He crawled forward on hands and knees, gasping for air as the chanting swelled to a deafening crescendo. His phone slipped from his pocket, clattering to the floor beside him. A final message flashed across the broken screen, trembling violently, as though it too were afraid. Break the sickle, or become it. His hands curled into fists as his nails tore through the soft, fleshy floor, black ichor spilling around his fingers. But how? How could he break something that had no beginning or end? He pressed his forehead to the floor, sobbing. Then the knocking changed. 3 heavy thuds came from directly inside his chest. His breath hitched violently, and he looked down in horror. His shirt shifted, rippled, as though something inside him pressed outward against the fabric. A shape, a hand. Its fingers splayed against his ribs, pushing, testing, from deep within his own body. His voice whispered, "Let me out." He screamed and clawed at his chest, raking bloody furrows into his skin, as his ribs groaned under the pressure of the thing trying to force its way through. The reflections laughed in unison, a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to rattle the air itself. "You're already the door." His nails broke as he tore at his flesh, his vision tunneling as pain and fear intertwined into one blinding wave. The walls of the hallway melted and twisted, becoming a shifting tunnel of countless doors stacked atop each other. Each door bore his face, each one knocking against its own frame in a maddening, endless rhythm. His reflection, tall, pale, hollow-eyed, emerged from the nearest door frame, tilting its head as it regarded him with something like pity. "We all thought we were the last," it whispered. "We were wrong." The air vibrated violently, the pressure mounting until his eardrums felt ready to burst. The reflections lunged at once, their hands plunging into his chest, their fingers digging deep. He screamed, though no sound came out. His vision went white as something vast and cold filled him to the brim. Time fractured. He was no longer in the hallway, no longer anywhere. He floated in an endless void where doors hung suspended like stars, each one throbbing faintly in rhythm with a vast heartbeat that seemed to pulse from the center of everything. He tried to speak, but his mouth was gone, his body a hollow shell filled with the echo of knocks repeated across lifetimes. A single door drifted closer. Unlike the others, this one was pristine. No cracks, no ichor, no claws, just a plain wooden door with a brass knob. He recognized it, his childhood bedroom. The door shuddered violently as a faint voice leaked through, trembling, young, terrified. "Is someone there? Please don't open it." His hollow form floated closer, weightless, unthinking. His hand raised itself, his fingers extending toward the brass knob. He didn't want to. He didn't want to. But the cycle was a hungry thing, and he was its vessel now. From the other side, the younger voice pleaded again, softer this time, almost inaudible. "Please, don't open it." His fingers brushed the knob. The door pulsed under his touch. His mouth, no longer his but a hollow aperture filled with echoes, spoke. "You already did." The void pulsed around him like a living thing, a vast black sea alive with faint heartbeats and slow, grinding breaths. He floated weightless, unmoored from time and space. Yet the weight pressing down on his mind was unbearable. Before him, doors stretched endlessly in every direction, some pristine and whole, others splintered and bleeding dark ichor that drifted in viscous droplets through the weightless space. The knocking had grown louder now, no longer confined to wood and plaster, but resonating within him, through him, as if his bones themselves were echo chambers. Knock, knock. The sound was steady, patient, impossibly old. His fingers twitched, or did they? He wasn't sure they were still there. He wasn't sure he was still there. From somewhere deep within, a whisper rose, his own voice layered and distorted, until it sounded like a choir of broken versions of himself. "You know this place. You made it." His breath, or what passed for it, hitched. He wanted to scream, to deny it, but no words came. Instead, his mouth opened of its own accord and whispered back, "I know." Something shifted in the dark. A door nearer than the others trembled faintly, then swung open with a slow, deliberate groan. Pale light spilled out, illuminating a small figure standing within the threshold. His chest constricted violently. It was him, younger, barely a teenager, face pale and wide-eyed with terror, hands shaking as they clutched the frame. The boy's lips moved soundlessly, and then the whisper came, soft but clear, "Please don't open it." His hollow chest ached with a memory he couldn't fully grasp. That night, the innocent knocking, the sound that had answered. He wanted to warn the boy, wanted to reach out and scream, "Don't do it. get away, but his body didn't respond. His hand, detached from his will, raised slowly, fingers curling toward the brass knob. The boy's eyes widened in terror. "Please, don't open it." But the hand kept moving. The door pulsed under his touch, warm, alive. Its surface rippled faintly, as if something vast and unseen shifted just beneath. He felt it then, truly felt it for the first time, the thing beyond the door. It wasn't him. It wasn't anything. It was hunger, a raw, endless need so deep it had devoured everything that had ever touched it. And now it was inside him, wearing his face, speaking in his voice. His reflection formed in the rippling wood, hollow-eyed and grinning wide. The reflection whispered, "You knock because you are empty. You open because you hope to be filled." Tears streamed down the boy's face as the door creaked wider. A hand, his hand, slid through the crack, fingers twitching. The boy stumbled back in horror as the knocker's voice, his voice rose in a layered chorus. Reality buckled. The void shuddered violently as countless doors began opening at once. From each threshold poured endless reflections, broken, decayed versions of himself crawling forward on twisted limbs, their mouths gaping wide to release that same wordless scream. They clambered over one another, their hands reaching for him, their mouths whispering in perfect unison, "Answer, answer, answer." His body convulsed as they grabbed hold, their cold fingers merging with his flesh, pulling, tearing, rebuilding. He felt his shape stretching, warping, hollowing out, until he could no longer tell where they ended, and he began. He screamed, not in fear, but in understanding. This was not death. This was transfiguration. He was no longer one. He was legion. He was the sound. He was the void. A final, massive knock echoed through every door, so loud it seemed to rupture the space around him, shattering the fragile membrane of reality. When the echoes faded, he stood in silence, alone yet infinite. He lifted his new hands, pale, long-fingered, faintly glowing, and pressed them against a nearby door. On the other side, a trembling voice whispered, "Please, don't open it." He smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just the inevitable smile of a thing fulfilling its nature. His mouth moved, and his voice, layered and resonant, said the words that sealed the loop once again. "You already did." The knocking began anew. Did you hear that? The knocking, it hasn't stopped. Maybe it never will. Somewhere out there, another door is shaking. Another hand is reaching, and someone else is whispering, "Please, don't open it." But the truth? It's too late. The cycle has already begun. If you're brave enough to keep going, if you want to uncover more stories like this, twisted and true, the kind that keeps you awake long after the video ends, then hit subscribe. Join us as we dive deeper into chilling history, haunted echoes, and the mysteries that refuse to stay silent.